Welcome, everyone. I'm Catherine Gregory, CEO of Modern Wisdom Press, and I am here today with Jeff Shuck of Plenty Consulting, and I'm so excited about our conversation today to talk about leading with light, choosing conscious leadership when you're ready for more. And Jeff is the co-author of this book with Jennifer Mulholland. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I know this is a big moment, and you guys have put so much blood, sweat, and tears into birthing this book into the world. And I'm just curious, it's unique to write a book with someone else, let alone the journey of writing a book alone is something, significant, no doubt. And then bringing two creative visions together and this co-creative leadership partnership that you have in your work. I'm so curious to hear, how this was, bringing your wisdom and your expertise together in a co-creative effort of writing, Leading with Light. And bringing
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm chuckling because I'm gonna use that question and many questions to say thank you in so many ways to Modern Wisdom. And I want to first of all say thank you for having me today, and would encourage your audience, if they haven't heard it, to hear the companion podcast with my business partner Jennifer Mulholland and my co-author, and hear her take on things. She can fact check me on a lot of this. But I really want to thank you for all of your mentorship and leadership and coaching. And without you, this book wouldn't be. It simply wouldn't be. So I just feel so grateful to you. And your question is making me laugh because two or 2.5 years ago, when we were thinking about a book and we got to the point of realizing we're going to need some help bringing this to ground, one of the many things that drew us to Modern Wisdom is that you're practicing co-leadership too. You work with a co-leader in Nathan, and you two have a beautiful relationship. And we have evolved our relationship with you, and through it see how you complement one another, and how you work through your disagreements and where you find your points of alignment. And I think at the end of the day, that's the answer to the question. I think just like the book wouldn't exist without Modern Wisdom, the book absolutely would not exist without Jennifer. And it's funny, there were moments through the process where you're totally aligned with someone, and the words are flowing and every chapter seems to be laid out, and then without even knowing how or why, the next day you're in disagreement about something, or you're seeing things from different angles. And one of the things that was so great about the process of writing and then editing is, by the end of it, I have no idea what I wrote and what Jen wrote and who was the original author of things. And I use the analogy with people of, there's a great Dr. Seuss book called The Sneetches. This is going way back if people have ever read it, but the Sneetches get all mixed up. The star-bellied Sneetches don't like the plain-bellied Sneetches, and sooner at a certain point they all get mixed up together and nobody knows which is which. And that's how I feel about the beautiful process of the book. I think, Jennifer and I each brought our own ideas, but we have spent so much time working together that most of those overlapped. And the ones that didn't, over time, those kind of bumps and I wouldn't even say disagreements, those differences in perspective just kind of get resolved out. So I hope I answered your question in there somewhere, but it was an incredible process and feels a bit surreal now that we're out of it, honestly, that we're talking about this creature that we've created. And you, Catherine, when we first met you, you talked about birthing a book and bringing this life force into existence. And that is really what it feels like. There is this independent thing called Leading with Light, the book, that's a bit Jennifer and a bit me, and it's a bit you and Nathan, and it's a bit all of our clients, and it's going to be hopefully mostly made up of the thoughts and dreams of the people who read it. So it's just been the best, most miraculous process of co-creation.
I love your answer. That's so beautiful. And it's so surreal when you're holding your book in your hand. And I can't wait for you to have that experience coming soon. when you physically have manifested something tangible, physical into the world.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful co-creative endeavor that you've birthed. So congratulations. And
Thank you.
I do want to touch on something you said, because the co-leadership, this is about really your book is about conscious leadership. It's about finding alignment. It's about bringing the work you do at Plenty, bringing teams together who maybe aren't in agreement, or who are maybe struggling with alignment. And so I'm just curious, can you speak a little bit about first of all, your definition of what conscious leadership is, if you can sum that up, and then
Yeah.
how that plays out for the teams who come to the retreats at Plenty.
Yeah. Well, let me try to condense a couple hundred pages into a short answer, and you gong me whenever you need to. I'm going to share a story that did not make it into the book, but that is about the idea of conscious leadership. Jen and I have been working together for almost 10 years, and independently have been, I think, on the same path for, our whole adult lives. So it's quite a bit of time at this point. And both, I think, always practiced a sense of what maybe in the 90s we would have called values-centered leadership, or idealistic leadership, or mindful leadership. And, when we started to work together again in 2015, we didn't really have a name for this kind of leadership, but we talked about the idea that we wanted to help people understand how leaders could be, how they could be as people, and less about what leaders do. And, there's so many great leadership books out there that if you're doing anything in this space, you kind of have to ask yourself, what do we have to add to this process? And I think pretty quickly on in our retreat work, we realized, there's so much of the leadership text is around do. The 7 habits of highly effective leaders, the 5 principles of leadership, discover your strengths, and the 30-point inventory, and all these things that are valuable, like checklists on activities that you can take or ways that you can improve yourselves. But they didn't really get to what we wanted to talk about, which is at a certain point, on the journey of not just your career, but of your life, you realize you're kind of creating your own advice. And the advice of other people can take you a certain distance, but you go the rest of the way on your own. And a lot of what the real journey of life is about is deciding what's valuable enough to you that you want to internalize it, not what's valuable enough to other people that they want to write about it. So that was this idea of, how do we be authentic people? How do we find out what's real for ourselves, not what other people say has worked for them? And so, to your specific question about the term conscious leadership, 3 or 4 years ago, when we were deciding, now we're at the point we want to write a book about this, what should we call it? And Jen had just read a book called Conscious Leadership by John Mackey, the CEO and I think founder of Whole Foods. And there's other books about conscious leadership in the space. And she said, I think this is close enough to it. And I hated the term. I hated it. I thought it sounded snooty. There was something about it that just rubbed me the wrong way. And, I think all of us who are in circles of spiritual growth see that there's sometimes a spiritual arrogance that we can take on. We don't want to, we don't intend to, but it can be part of the field. And I just didn't like it. And we went round and round about this. And finally, Jen, I said, well, what is, conscious? What does it mean? Like, if we're going to use this term, what does it mean? And we had our own list. We had a 10-part list and then a 5-part list. And over time, we got it down to 3 things. And I think that's when I said, yeah, that, whatever that is, I want that. And so how we ended up aligning on it and what the book is about is 3 basic ideas about, first of all, just being awake, literally being conscious. And 90% of it, 90% of the book, 90% of conscious leadership is about just opening our eyes, just seeing what we label it, seeing our own narrative, and then being willing to create a little bit of space from that. So just awake, what do I see? Like, I see. The second part is we call it being aligned, being willing to ask yourself the question of, does this work for me? And so many times in my past life, I see the stresses that I had at work or the worries I had or the regrets came from doing things that I was aware weren't serving me, weren't aligned with my best goals. But I had never like literally asked the question to myself, do I want to do this anymore? You know, is this working for me? So if aware is what do I see, aligned is does this work? And then the third part is being intentional. Once I can see what's around me without labeling it, and once I can act without judgment on, or see without judgment if it's working for me or not, then I can choose how I want to be going forward. And so that idea of just being more aware, being more aligned, and being more intentional is what we ended up coalescing the book about. And Catherine, as you know, we had so much content for the book, and the process of the book and your mentorship, your incredible mentorship was about actually stripping so many things away, right? We were going to include 7 other points, and we were going to include these other methods, and it's actually about pulling things away. And the more we do that, the more I feel like I'm in an authentic relationship with this idea of conscious leadership, of just awareness, alignment, and intention.
That's beautiful, Jeff. And I think more than stripping away content, right? It's really knowing who you're writing it for and how to reach them. And so I'm curious if you can speak to that. Like, who is this book for?
Yeah.
The subtitle is very evocative. I'll just read it again. Leading with Light is the main title. Choosing conscious leadership when you're ready for more. And so ready for more, like I heard, in your own story, there was some misalignment in your previous work, or maybe you weren't, really stepping up to understand yourself more in these roles. And I'm just curious if you can speak to that. Like, what does that mean when someone is looking for more, or they're ready for more?
Yeah, well, I'm laughing again because you're not going to stop me from complimenting you and Nathan and Modern Wisdom, because this was one of the first areas you made us slow down and say, you all need to spend some time thinking about who this book is about and who it's for. And Jen and I, in our way, said, well, it's for everybody. Everyone's going to love this. And you were like, everybody is a really big audience. So let's get a little more precise. And one of the great things you led us through was a few exercises around coming up with this ideal reader and who the persona is. And we ended up having a name for this person, and it's loosely based on a number of people we've worked with. And I would say I'm going to describe the person, but my hope is it is a book for everyone, because I believe strongly there's this person in all of us, and it's a person. It could be a person who's achieved a lot in their life already. They've started a business, maybe they've run a company, maybe they've successfully raised a family, maybe they've done all of those things, and they've climbed this ladder. It's not that they didn't want to climb the ladder, they wanted to do it and they were great at it, and they've gotten to the top and they've said, huh, well, now what else is there, right? And a lot of the people that we work with, particularly I'd say on the individual side of our work, fit that description. Really accomplished people are people who seek more coaching. And those people are always kind of asking themselves, okay, now what do I see? And does this work for me? So that idea of being ready for more might just um, describe someone who's achieved a lot and now has said, I've kind of outgrown my goals. I actually think there's something more on offer for me, and I'm not sure what it is. But that being said, I would tell you we work with a lot of people who would maybe describe themselves a different way. They might be right out of college and they studied something, and then they graduate and they're like, I didn't want to do that. Or they took 3 years of law school and they got the law degree, and now they're an associate in a law firm and they have this huge law school debt, and they realize, oh man, I don't want to do this anymore. Or someone who's just having their first child and is trying to juggle, time for a career and being present with their children, and saying, I don't know if this is the life that I signed up for. So really that idea of when you're ready for more is as soon as you have that feeling that, wait, I think there might be more in store for me, in our view, is the sign that there is. And so I hope the book is an invitation for everybody, whether your dreams are big or small, and those labels are totally arbitrary, by the way. All of your dreams are wonderful. When you start to say, I have a dream and I'm not exactly sure how to unlock it, that's the sign that you're ready for something more. And in our view, that's when, before you make a set of checklists and a bunch of things to do and a set of goals for yourself, just slow down and take some time to be aware, get aligned with what works, make intentional decisions. And so that's, I hope the book can usher people through whatever next chapter that they have in store for them, and help them write it instead of feel like it's being written for them.
Sure. Yeah. And I think there's so much practical advice in your book, and it sounds like it's really written for the individual. And yet I know you work with teams and you bring teams in and you take them through the process that you're sharing in your book. And so I just want to ask about that and the retreats that you have. Can you just share a little more?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. Well, we have kind of a number of different retreats and workshops. There's two that we talk a lot about in the book, and one is called Lantern, the Lantern Leadership Retreat. And that is all based on the principles of the book. But the one that you're talking about, actually, I would say heavily informed the book as well. It's called the Meridian Strategy Retreat, and Meridian being derived from both, the lines that we lay across the globe to kind of chart our path from one place to another, but also the ley lines in our body that carry energy through our body. And so the idea of Meridian is to set strategy energetically, to make sure that when you're setting strategy as an organization, you think as much about what feels good and what you're passionate about as you do about, what's going to drive revenue. Because ultimately, if you can, you're going to get both things. And I would say that process, Catherine, has really, in so many ways, informed what's in the book. In fact, there are many stories in the book about Meridian, and I'll just give you one example. Um, one of the things that we talk about for conscious leadership is the idea of loosening our grip, of allowing ourselves to understand that we don't control everything around us. And, it's kind of part one of awareness, but it's a really difficult thing to practice, is being willing to let things go. And particularly on, I think, structured teams, whether you're at a nonprofit or a corporation, a lot of that experience is about structured planning, is about the idea that we're going to sit together and plan. And I think the mistake that we see is planning is not the same as, crafting the future. And creating a plan in Excel is no guarantee that it actually will, turn out that way. And one of the exercises that we do in Meridian is we ask people to imagine the last year that they had. Imagine that it's New Year's Eve and you're sitting with everyone on your team and you're thinking about the biggest thing that happened this year, maybe the biggest accomplishment that you achieved together, or, the biggest disruption that you didn't anticipate, the biggest crisis. And then we say, was that big event anywhere on your strategic plan on January 1st? And almost without fail, teams will say, no, we got this massive client that, exploded the growth of the company. We had never planned on it. Tragically, our CEO was killed and it caused all of this leadership transition. We got bought by a different company. And again, we hear that the things that most impact growth are unexpected things that we don't plan for. And yet, a lot of the traditional strategic planning that companies and teams do is focused on this idea that everything will stay the same from quarter to quarter and that we'll grow at 5%, a month. And that doesn't work that way. So our work with teams really, again, based on the idea of conscious leadership, is we always have to be aware about what's changing around us. We have to be clear on our values so we can align our actions to them. And then we're not going to be caught off guard when unexpected things happen. That's called life. So we're going to act with intention when things come out of the blue, so we could take advantage of opportunities, and so we can respond to challenges without freaking out. And I would say it's been so rewarding to do that work, and surprising how much thirst there is for conscious strategy and how much thirst there is just for conscious growth. And I'll stop in a second, but back to your first question about living a whole life. That is really the idea here, is whatever you're doing, whether you're in a large company or a one-person shop, or whether you're at home with your kids or, you're out with your friends, is that you can be the same person wherever you are. and that you can bring your strengths with you wherever you go, and that it's okay to bring the things that you're scared about wherever you go, and that we can just be one whole complete person instead of having to wear all these different faces and all these different outfits. So that's kind of how those worlds intersect. And it's just really incredible work to see people um, have epiphanies about their own behavior and what is working for them and how they can bring that as something that helps the people around them.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes. Tell us how somebody can learn more about these retreats. I'm just imagining folks who are listening who might, want more conscious strategy, or want, maybe they're in a crisis right now and they want this kind of support. How can they find you and your offerings?
Oh, thank you. Well, the book again is called, oh, I think you're hearing my dogs in the background, and I'm sorry for that. They're excited about the book. The book is called Leading with Light. Our company is called Plenty Consulting. And so people can find us at plentyconsulting.com. And when you're on our site, there's a section on the retreats. You can see everything that we have to offer, from executive coaching to conscious leadership to strategic planning for, conscious minded companies.